This meeting is being recorded.
All right, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to AFCOM Southern California's chapters second quarter 2023 educational series webinar. I'd like to start off today's webinar by introducing our board. Di, why don't we start with you?
Diane Krabiel-Delson, owner of DKKD Staffing. I've been around for about 20 years, located in Westlake, focused on SoCal, but I staff all over US, and I'm not industry specific, but I build IT and security teams.
Hey, Doug, why don't you go ahead?
I am Doug Allman. I'm the Network Operations Manager for San Diego Gas and Electric, and I've been part of the board in AFCOM for coming up, I guess, about 6 years now.
And Yeet?
Hello, I'm Yeet Food. I'm with EYP Mission Critical Facilities, part of Rambo. I run our electrical design group, designing data centers, and I'm located in Los Angeles, and I've been doing this for far too long.
And I'm Jason Shepard, and we're missing two people from our board today. We've got David, who's literally on a plane as we speak, taking his son back to the East Coast to look at colleges. And we got Brad from our team, who's literally in an AI seminar today. And so my name is Jason Shepard. We're going to go ahead and get started here. So my name is Jason Shepard. I am the president of the AFCOM Southern California chapter. I just took over as president this year. I've been on the board for about 9 years. I've been playing a role of like operations officer, chief communications officer, leading a lot of our panel discussions over the years. David was wearing two hats of both treasurer and president, and he's slid into the treasurer role, so I'll take over as president. I really appreciate the opportunity. A little bit about our practice in our chapter here for AFCOM Southern California chapter. First of all, let me kind of give you a little bit of background as far as myself and the role that I play. So I am a location analyst, site selection specialist, and capacity acquisition. I'm a broker, commercial real estate broker. I specialize in properties that use significant amounts of electricity, namely data centers. I've been doing it for 25 years, mostly here in Southern California in the Silicon Valley, but everything else we're doing across the country. We've got a pretty unique perspective on how we look at data centers and logical flow in our panel discussions here for the chapter. Our chapter is a not-for-profit organization focused on education for the IT and data center operations community. And the one thing I want to be able to say here is our community. What does that mean? Who are our constituents for the Southern California chapter? Well, we look at data centers in three categories: corporate users, enterprise data centers, right? ABC, XYZ Insurance, right? Their own corporate data center facility. There's that middle category of the hyperscalers, the Facebooks of the world, the Googles of the world, right? And their mega facilities that they have across the country. And then we have third-party operators. And third-party operators are multi-tenant type facilities, whether it's a wholesale colocation, large chunks of space might lease to a retail colocation provider who might have a managed services provider as a client. It's almost like the old Russian nesting dolls, right? One inside the next, right? That's that 3PO model. Our Southern California chapter, when you look at our population of corporate users in our marketplace, what you'll see here is we have a full diverse community, full variety of biotech and media and aerospace, right? What we don't have is any of the hyperscalers that are headquartered in this marketplace. So what we try to do is, with our chapter, is focus our education content on bridging the gap between the IT teams and the data center operations team to make sure that everyone is learning, hey, what are the biggest trends in the marketplace today? Just want to look back a second here. Last year, we did our, for my firm, I work with a firm called Cressa, and Cressa is the largest tenant rep only firm, occupier rep firm in the country. I manage the data center practice for the firm internationally. We do an annual data center survey. And so why I want to share this particular slide is this was our 2022 co-location survey, where we basically interviewed the various co-location providers to say, what are corporate users, enterprise users actually deploying inside your data center? I don't want to know about what you can do. what are the actual customers actually deploying inside your facilities? And if you can see here, the top row here is the enterprise customers. The second row down is what the cloud providers were doing. Now, this is last year. Now, this is all pre-AI discussions, right? Which I know Bill will talk about a little bit later here today. But if you look at the average kW per cabinet that corporate users were deploying was about 6 kW per cabinet. Okay, let's talk about 30 amp to 8 volt circuits, which typically is that 5 kW per cabinet range. There's been a slight uptick, but the corporate or the cloud providers are usually that 15 kW and above. And you'll start to see some of the discussions of how that's going to get even higher. The last point I want to kind of show there is that the average customer utilization of capacity was below 50%, right? So there's still a lot of overcommitting on power relative to what actually is being used, which just suggests that the need for more needs analysis before you go to market. A look back, what were the top 5 considerations, the new trends, the emerging trends last year? 1 was cloud repatriation. 2, it's a seller's market, right? There's so much demand for co-location space today, not a lot of inventory, which is driving up the actual rates. Hybrid models, cloud adjacency, hybrid co-location, supply chain issues, which we'll talk more about today. And then there was a shift towards flexible terms, right? So a lot of the colos saying that customers were looking to shift to almost like a cloud type of a model, pay as you go, pay by the drink, right? And so we'll see how that's grown from there. IT recruiting. I'm going to turn this over to Di from our board, who's our expert IT recruiter here in Southern California, to get some trends on this IT staffing.
Thanks, Jason. And so what I'm going to do today is kind of help some of those people out there that are on the job market. Either you're looking or you know somebody who is. And what I typically see in the job market has shifted a little bit on trends. Usually I see at the end of the year is more using up the budgets and then the leadership roles. And my first quarter 2023 was actually better than my entire 2022. And what's happening now is that it's shifting quite a bit, like I said, with the what's hot right now. Usually my leadership roles are in the beginning of the year. I have more right now. I've got CTO role, VP roles, things like that. Then we build out the teams and they strategize and hire on the talent to do more hands-on work. Right now, I'm seeing kind of a combination of it. I have leadership roles, I have help desk roles again. I just attended the Evanta CIO and CISO events. CISOs are still the celebrities out there, high in demand, business to business, business to consumer, and heads of supply chain, of course, with data centers as well, having difficulties with supply chain and procurement, hot need out there. Also, AI and chat GPT, hot topics, really hot. And I actually look at it as an efficiency and paving the way to new technology and, new jobs. If you're on the job market, you've got to be a salesperson. I was talking to Jason about this a couple weeks ago, and think of when you get a cold call. It's that first 3 seconds. Did they grab your attention? Will you listen to them for 30 seconds and then will you let them continue? We kind of do the same thing with resumes. When we see a resume, we look for the buzzwords real quick, and then we look for a little bit more content, and then we see if we really want to talk to them. So you really have to be a salesperson in this market. And also, change the summary at the top of your resume. Make it stand out to what's applicable to the job, not necessarily just your overall summary of your skills. You want to hit points of requirements for the job. You can go to the next slide. So then let's say you get the interview. Again, right out of the gate, first impressions. Are you actually engaging with the person? If there's dead air, you want to talk about what you've read about the company. You definitely want to do your research before you do it. And I'm sure many of you have heard all this, but it can't help to have some refreshers. Talk a little bit about the company, what you're excited about, maybe pull up some details that you found out about the people that you're interviewing with on LinkedIn, things like that. So you want to try to match the interviewer's pace. If they talk a little bit slower, talk slow. If they talk fast, they talk fast. Kind of engage, get that rapport going. Next slide. Again, you have to be a salesperson. So if you get that interview, while you're there, make sure you can ask as many questions as possible. Again, state your interest, find out what the timeframes are for next interview, if there's anything else you can answer. And also if what's your competition like and what does it look like? And then at the very end, you got to remember there's a lot of different people out there looking for jobs. We alone, for let's say the CTO role that I have over 200 applicants just for that role. So you have to remember that these internal companies, when you're applying directly to companies and to agencies, they're getting hundreds of applicants. So how are you going to make yourself stand out? And it's just part of the process to get a rejection. Make sure you learn from it. And then if you're looking for companies and if you're really interested, look for companies that really take care of their employees internally and help promote. And then find out what they're doing for a great culture and a great environment. If you want any details from me, feel free to follow up. There's my contact information there. I have a newsletter where I put all the brand new jobs. I do resume tips, what's happening in the industry. I have a LinkedIn group for leaders called Diane Craybill Executive and Technology Recruiting on LinkedIn. And I'm the only one that posts on there, and it's just leadership jobs. And of course, my website, DKKD Staffing. And that's it.
Great, Di, thank you so much. And I think you're an excellent example of why we added you to the board, right? You're just amazing at what you do. So we're really thankful that you're able to participate.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, I'm going to talk about before we get to what's gone on at PTC and at Data Center World this year. We're going back to one of the slides that we shared last year that I got a lot of positive feedback on, which is, hey, what about power rates in Southern California? And how can we drop those rates and how can we get better rates? So what I want to be able to share is, let's just talk about basics of power for a second, right? So you got commercial power rates, and this is the typical power rates that you're going to get from your utility provider just for basically showing up, right? As a commercial user, whether you're an industrial user, data center user, or what have you. This means that the power company brings the power to the green transformer outside your building, and the building owner pulls in the actual power to the power panel inside. This is what we refer to as commercial rates. So if I were to take and just do an analysis on the left-hand side here, just a 500 kilowatt user. A 500 kilowatt user, which is about 750 amps worth of power, right? Which technically 499 kW anyway. If I were to kind of utilize LADWP's rates from October of 2021, these rates are published a year in arrears. And so October 2022, the year-end 2021 rates come out. So if I'm using those rates, a 1.5 PW, and a PW is the ratio between the amount of power you need for your critical infrastructure, the IT server level, then another percentage of power for the cooling systems, right, back of house systems. So modern data centers are designed in that kind of 1.3, probably no higher than 1.5. I'd kind of default to yeet for that kind of stuff. But if I were just using that analysis, that 500 kilowatt use, 333 critical at a 1.5 PUE, that annual electricity bill here in LA would be, call it $630,000. But if I were to make that a more efficient 1.3, I'd drop that cost of power down to $545,000. $545,000 annually. Okay. Now, if I were to be in a building that had its own utility substation, I would then go from commercial rates to industrial rates, or call it sub-transmission rates. Okay. So you can see that right off the bat, my cost of power drops. I use LADWP as an example here because they went from 19 cents a kilowatt hour down to 18 cents. That's not a huge delta. But there's certain markets, but there are huge deltas, right? So for instance, you're seeing at the Rocky Mountain Power up in Salt Lake City is 6 cents a kilowatt hour. Salt River Project there in Phoenix is sub 6 cents a kilowatt hour. You can start to understand why, if you're moving from Southern California to Phoenix, why that makes a lot of sense, okay? But part of the challenge is being in the buildings that have their own utility substations. before I move on to our first guest speaker, I just wanted to point out at the very bottom, if you take those 14 power providers listed on the screen there today, you'll see that on average, the commercial rates were 40% higher than the industrial rates. Okay, so typically the ROI for building your own substation is just a few years, but there are a lot of intricacies that come into doing so. So I'd like to add our first speaker in, Jeremy Tanner, and Jeremy is with Cache Valley Electric, and Cache Valley does a lot of power line build out, substation build out in different markets across the southwestern United States. And so, Jeremy, welcome to our webinar. And the first question I want to be able to ask you is about utility scale transformers and lead times. We've heard a lot about at these various trade shows we're going to about nightmares of 3+ years of lead times to get new transformers. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Sure. Right now, we're seeing on average for anything under 34,000 volts, those low voltage transformers, medium voltage transformers are around 3 years, 36 months to be able to get one of those. And unless you have some sort of a relationship with the supplier, it's way out there. We're not even seeing where companies will give us quotes at this point because they're so far out. For the high voltage ones, anything 46,000 volts and above, you're looking at 22 to 36 weeks. And that depends on where they're coming from. If they're manufactured here in the United States, that you may be able to get them a little bit quicker, but actually South America, we're seeing them being able to produce quicker out of South America and get them on boats and get them up here. But that has started to get better since COVID. The shipping is starting to get quicker. So those are the big ones right now.
So when you're talking about, so again, I'm going to get technical for a second, right? But there's transmission substations, right? This is like the major substations across, going from the power plants to a regional kind of landing point. And then they go off to distribution substations, which then feed the buildings. These medium voltage transformers that you're referring to, these 34 kV, that's typically what you find at those distribution substations, correct?
Well, it depends on, I guess, I would say you're going to have a higher voltage coming in, and then you're going to have those distribution transformers throughout your campus to knock that voltage down to usable voltage around your campus. You're going to, if you in a substation itself, a distribution substation, you're still going to take your voltage anywhere above 46 kV and then put that out through feeders out through your campus there.
Okay. Wait, and then, for example, even if I were located right on the actual power lines, right? Is this as simple as me just kind of building my own substation and tapping in?
No, absolutely not. So the power company, the local utility will have to do a power coordination study to see if the amount of power that you're needing is available on that power line. If it's got to be, if the conductor size is large enough, if there's other people in the queue ahead of you that's already requesting that power. So there's a lot of things that tie into that. And right now we're seeing that that process is taking quite a while, and in order to even get in the queue, you have to pay $10,000 a lot of times to do that power coordination study just to keep your spot. They'll credit that back to you once you decide on a project, but that's just so people that are kicking the tires, they don't have to spend all that time.
And then we didn't talk about this in advance, but I guess the question is, does it matter what size the power lines are that I can tap? For example, if I have got a 34 kV substation I want to put in, right? Can I tap the 365 kVs, the 230 kVs?
Yeah, it just depends on your load requirements, what you're requiring for your load, and if that line that's available is capable of handling that.
And then the last question I have for you is, what about line extensions? If my property is not on the actual power lines and I need to go tap in, what does that entail?
So then you're going to run into right-of-way issues, and that power coordination study is going to go through and tell you, what kind of right-of-way issues you may have and where that line has to go. And depending on where it goes, it can cost, more or less money if it can come straight to you, if it's got to take a different route because of those right-of-way issues. But everything, I can't stress enough out to get that power coordination study done and get going, because it can be a 2 to 3 year process, even at that.
Right. Thanks, Jeremy. Please, I welcome you to stay on for the rest of the call here because we're going to have some Q&A there at the end.
Before Jeremy jumps off, Jason, I would just add, this isn't just a America problem. it's a growing problem across the globe, and countries like Ireland and in the Netherlands and in Singapore, literally they have moratoriums, Germany even, on building new data centers because of power availability in general and because of power distribution challenges. So this is something we all have to keep a serious eye on.
Has a question real quick. My husband actually used to be VP data centers over at MySpace, and I know that they had gone to Alaska to check out the situation out there. Has anybody done that in the last few years? What's happening out in Alaska? Because it keeps it cold. Everything stays cold.
Talking about for free cooling considerations.
Yes.
Alaska's a little bit remote, and the challenge is that when you're siting a data center, as Jason will tell you, you need to have power, space, and communications and fiber and so forth. And the challenge with Alaska is that it's while it's nice and cool and cold actually up there, both the power infrastructure as well as the telecom infrastructure is probably not sturdy enough and spread enough to basically support large data center development. And that's probably why you don't see everybody sort of flocking over there. And not to mention the fact that it's, even to be able to do any kind of project in Alaska requires all sorts of special permitting and know-how, even to get licensed as an engineer, for instance. You have to be able to take a college level course, like something like 12, 16 credit hours, just to be able to deal with designing in that climate. So, that's why I probably don't see quite as much activity up there as you might have anticipated. Now, when you start looking at the Nordics and in Europe, you do see a lot more activity there because they have the benefit of having a little bit more infrastructure that can support data center development.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on from here, we want to talk about the key trends and takeaways. So let's just talk about the two different conferences that we've talked about here in the beginning part of the year. There's obviously a lot of different data center type conferences, whether they're at the Dell World, so right, and what have you. But the data center centric conferences, there've been two really big ones so far this year. Pacific Telecom Council back in January, and this is out in Honolulu. And this conference is primarily attended by, it's right in the name, right? The telecommunications providers, a lot of the cloud providers, the hyperscalers, and a lot of the colo providers. PTC is not a big destination for the enterprise users that you find typically at Data Center World, right? And so we have a little bit of takeaways. What type of themes have we seen across both? And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the punchline, right? And that punchline is, what four themes did we see across both conferences? And what you'll notice here is I've color coded these topics, okay? Because what I'm about to show you is some of the different session headings. And I'm not going to read each of these. I'm just trying to kind of get you to kind of recognize the color codings, right? Anything which is green, which is sustainability, ESG related, anything which was supply chain related is in that red, anything cloud, blue, AI, purple, okay? So, well, first of all, Greg, I know you had a comment here. You thought you wanted to kind of talk about some of your high level trends before we went on.
Yeah, no, I can share just, and a lot of them are hit here, but Bill and I both have been at a lot of conferences together in the last 3 months. And there's a couple of things that just seem to show up at every single conference that we're at. The good news for all of us that are in the digital and IT infrastructure space is compute creation and data center demand continues to explode far beyond any of our expectations. And we'll talk about, as this goes along today, about some of the drivers for that, but that's a very positive thing, but it's driving some serious issues. Sustainability initiatives and ESG initiatives remain absolutely top of mind everywhere we go for a variety of reasons. For some, it's because they're truly committed and wanting to do what's right for the planet. For others, it's because their CEO has stood on a stage and says, we're going to be carbon neutral or zero carbon by this date. And now they're starting to peel the onion and ask, what does that mean? How do we get there? And obviously data centers and IT infrastructure consume a lot of energy. So that's got very much on people's minds. And then the third part, kind of the ESG piece, is, we're starting to look at how do we do more with less. If you can't get more power, so how do I get more compute with the power I have? And some of these efficiency optimization and sustainability goals actually very directly drive straight back to that. The other thing I will talk more about as we go through these slides, supply chain. Yeah, it's getting better, but it's not fixed at all. There are some things that are still tall poles in a tents. We talked about, electricity challenges. Generators are still a problem. Chillers are still a problem. Getting fans, and we're even seeing, isolated problems on still getting boards and chips that affect products. And right when you think you've got it fixed, you find out a week later it's not fixed. So, having to lean in and really get closer to all of our partners and everybody in the ecosystem, and being able to forecast better and to really talk about what we're doing and to act quickly. We have a saying here, delay a day, it's going to cost you a week. Delay a week, it's going to cost you a month. Delay a month, it's going to cost you a quarter. There seems to be a cascading effect. So, we're encouraging, and the people that we're having the best success with, meeting deadlines, deploying capital, and building infrastructure the most quickly are the people that we have the tightest relationship we've ever had. And the kimonos are open, and the forecasts are being done together, and we're communicating. And kind of the last thing I'm seeing, and we'll talk again, liquid cooling, we're talking about it everywhere. And Bill will talk about some of the drivers of that. And then just this whole PR and regulation is coming into our lives. Bill and I were at a conference a week ago. Been doing this since 1984. I've never had protesters out in front of anywhere I went saying what I am doing is a bad thing. They had signs talking about data centers being power hogs. You're taking my power, you're taking our water, you're building ugly buildings. It was quite an eye-opener. Would you not agree, Bill?
It was certainly different. Those folks did not want to take a selfie with me, which is understandable. No, it was definitely interesting. And, in some ways, congratulations, everybody. The data center industry has made it. We are now mainstream and we have protesters. Well done. Well done. It's not bad to get noticed sometimes. Honestly, the only thing I want to add to this list is under number 3, cloud edge hybrid models and repatriation. Connectivity. One big theme at PTC was follow the cable, and you'll know where the next big data centers are going to be built. And one of the really fascinating things that we saw at PTC was just how much new fiber and cabling, undersea as well as terrestrial, was being laid down into emerging markets, Canada, spots of Canada that, would never have been lit up in the past, South America, Asia, and a lot of other places that are seen as emerging markets. So nothing's slowing down. I think there's a lot of great pace in this industry, but that's the only thing I think I'd add above and beyond what, Greg and Jason are talking about is interconnectivity and following the cable a little bit.
I moderated an interesting panel on Web 3.0 in DC a week ago. And I think it was Melvin Greer said, one thing that has not changed is the speed of light. And if you want to know where the next data centers are, get the map out and see where the super centers are, then look at all the gaps in between. We're trying to digitize the whole planet. AI and ML and IoT and some of the things that we'll continue to talk about on a regular basis. Some of them are very, very latency sensitive.
Well, and by the way, one thing is being, everyone that's on this call has been doing this for a while, right? I've been doing data centers for over 25 years now. And I remember back in the late 1990s, and this goes back when Doug and I were working together when you used to be with AT&T, right? Is that fiber is not ubiquitous, right? It's got to be trenched and laid, right? And so the way they used to trench and lay fiber is going after what they refer to as MTUs, multi-tenant units, high-rise office buildings. And they're not going to go out and build this fiber out in the middle of the sticks unless there's potential customers there, right, to utilize it. So anyway, moving on from this, I want to basically go through just some of the, again, I am not going to read these slides. I saw Bill's eyes kind of go wide. I'm just trying to get people to kind of recognize the color coding of some of the sessions that are here. This from PTC, again, everything green is kind of more ESG related, everything which is blue is cloud related. But the one thing I did want to point out, well, there were 2 particular sessions I found of interest. One, which was Mark Gonzi from, CEO from Digital Bridge. He came back out and his keynote session on the challenges and opportunities for digital infrastructure sector. He talked about, look, we're in a storm right now from a capital standpoint, right? Money isn't coming as easily as it used to, right? But right now, he says the fastest growing sector is edge. Hybrid cloud is workloads of the future. Still a bit of resistance to public cloud, and because of the hybrid model of public-private cloud, the larger corporations are going to start to want to control their environment, which suggests, again, more repatriation. That's not moving away from cloud. It's just, and I know Bill will talk about this a little bit later as well, but it's like more kind of counter steering a little bit, right? And then on the right side, there was a panel discussion of a number of different data center providers. Again, going back to what Greg was talking about, long lead times from not just utility scale transformers, but generators, Vertiv cooling systems, right? So what are those long lead time items? But also one thing here down on the lower right-hand corner, the impact of hyperscalers. There's so much demand by hyperscalers that they're taking down large chunks of power capacity in these various co-location facilities across the country. There's not a lot left over for the corporate user, for the enterprise user. And so if you are looking for co-location capacity, it's important to start looking early. Do your due diligence so that by the time you go to marketplace, you've fully vetted your project and we can understand what the options might be for you in those different markets.
Jason, as we talked earlier, I mean, that's creating a real interesting phenomenon. I mentioned in our kind of our pre-call, I have customers that used to shop 6, 7, 8, 5 megawatt blocks, and that's no longer big enough for some of the data center operators to take on. Conversely, there are some guys that realize, hey, I need to slice the pie up. But to your point, I am concerned that the enterprise user is getting squeezed. His rates are going to go up. His availability and access and number of people that might be interested in their business could be tight for a while.
Yeah, and by the way, and again, same thing here. I've put it all on the screen here. And by the way, we'll post this on our website. We'll post this on our LinkedIn page so everybody can kind of read all this. And by the way, this is being recorded too, so you can watch this at your leisure afterwards. But again, you'll start to see some of the trends that are going for the different sessions at these different facilities. But the session that I really enjoyed the most was Bill's session on the state of the data center facility. And so what I want to be able to do is turn it over to Bill, who was basically the chair and a keynote speaker for Data Center World this year. So we're lucky enough to have him on our call here today. So Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of go through some of your slides.
Thank you so much, Jason. And it's great to see all these wonderful names, not so much faces. I can't see all of you. So I'm hoping that you're comfortable, you're enjoying this conversation here. And by the way, we love an interactive audience. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, Bill, drink less coffee, whatever, put that into the chat window and we're going to have some time at the end to go over that. So this was a very special report. You know, this is the 8th time that I've had a chance to do this report, and we've tried to make it better every single time. And like Jason said, I am the program chair for Data Center World. So I work with an amazing team to lead this conference, and I'm really proud to say that this year we had a record-breaking number of attendees, record-breaking number of exhibitors, and I can't give it away, but Data Center World 2024 in Washington, D.C., which we'll throw up some dates here in just a little bit, is going to be bigger and better than we've ever seen. So I'm really excited about that. So Jason, go ahead and hit the next slide for me. We learned a lot. In this industry. You know, like we said earlier, connectivity is really paramount to what a lot of people are looking for. And in this situation specifically, right, we see how the average round trip time of a packet is about 13.1 milliseconds. And, you know, you can see how that number is actually, you know, if you take a look at that sub, about 48% are in that 10 millisecond or less. That's quick. That's speedy, which is part of the reason why you're going to see things like edge computing become a very, very powerful part of our infrastructure, because you need to have, like we said earlier, places where we can fill those gaps with connectivity. Next slide.
Yeah, Bill, quick question for you.
Yeah.
So going back to, you know, we've all been doing this a long time. So it used to be that, you know, our corporate clients used to come back and say, hey, we had a 30 millisecond round trip latency requirement, right? Is the reduced latency because of the interoperation needs of their various clouds and various applications? Why are we getting smaller? Why is it getting closer?
the content is getting richer. There's more data. And the other reality is that the type of content we're consuming requires low latency, right? Whether it's media, for example, content distribution networks, you got to make sure your Stranger Things are streaming properly on Netflix. And that's actually something we talked about over at Data Center World. But the other one are the critical types of applications, driverless cars that are autonomous, hospital systems, financial environments, FinServe, anything that requires a much faster communication time, millisecond, or a millisecond could be somebody's life. There were instances for the first time ever recorded deaths because of denial of service attack that actually happened in Germany. An attack took down a hospital, and unfortunately, a person had to be routed to a different facility because they were not able to care for this individual. So that's probably like the worst doom and gloom scenario, but I think it's because the content is richer. There's so much more data. And honestly, there's just this requirement from us, right? We're a persistently connected world and society. We need our stuff yesterday.
So before we go into the next slide specifically, I want to help our users, our constituents here in Southern California visualize what that means, right? So if we're looking at the majority is under 20 milliseconds, this is what your fiber optic route maps for long haul from Southern California look like. Okay, so for example, if you're here in LA, for you to go to Vegas or back to Pinapon, if you're going out I-10 and then up the river, or you're going out I-15, these are your ranges. And this is Lumen, formerly CenturyLink, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to go, for example, from LA to Phoenix and back, depending upon which fiber provider you're riding, that's 10 to 11 milliseconds. Okay, so that's still within that 20, but maybe not close enough for some of those users that Bill was talking about that need to be within 10 milliseconds. So make sure you're doing your due diligence before you start looking at different markets, because we've heard nightmare stories of deals on the East Coast. They're deals that were built too far away from New York City for your latency restrictions for financial transactions, right?
Trading data costs tens of millions of a millisecond.
And these numbers are improving. Just that this is important. That's a part of the reason why we've seen some organizations leave California for places like Las Vegas, right? With my former employer Switch, because they own a bunch of that fiber. They can promise a sub 10 millisecond latency over into California. So why pay the extra, money to be in that location where you can go somewhere else that's a little bit less expensive? But the good news is this is improving. WAN optimization and other technologies really do support the acceleration of a packet. So there's really creative ways that you can accelerate different types of traffic. I'm excited because these numbers give more organizations the opportunity to deploy critical infrastructure in locations that aren't necessarily outside their budget. So like places not like Nevada, Oregon, Texas, and Arizona, and other locales that you can start to hit them at very low latency rates. So that's why telecom is so important, and that's why edge is so important. Good stuff. Thank you. This was a really interesting slide. I'm going to stay on this for just a second. And everybody on this really wonderful webinar, if you're on your Amazon shopping list, get off and take a look at this slide because this is important. This is the first time we've ever asked this question. And I'm not going to lie to you, I was a little bit surprised. So follow me on this. We asked the current state of the cooling environment. 46% came back and said that our cooling environment meets all of our requirements. Our cooling solution meets all of our requirements, excuse me. That tells me that 54% are running out of cooling capacity. And that's like, whoa, let's pump the brakes here a little bit. And in having these conversations with honestly, many end users that came to Data Center World, this is accurate. Do more with less. There's constraints about bringing additional capacity online because of supply chain issues, amongst other things. So there's this new requirement to create high density, high performance compute kind of architectures where you're trying to put more and more and more into a rack. I know we removed this slide, but the average rack density continues to go up. It's 8.5 kilowatts per rack. Now, this is co-locations and enterprises combined. When we started doing this survey, that number was 6, right? So we're seeing sizable increases over time. And a lot of them are looking at things like liquid cooling as a real viable option for adoption into customers' facilities. And I love what was said earlier, that the that the impetus and driver for liquid cooling might not only be, density, it might be sustainability from that perspective too. And I think that's a really, really good statement. I'm intrigued and excited about these metrics because it forces organizations to think differently in terms of how they deploy stuff. Now, I'm going to give you one more metric to think about, and that's water conservation. In Arizona, they recently come out with a study that said that they're going to be running out of water, groundwater, over the next, I think, 25 to 50 years. And if I'm not mistaken, legislation in places like Nevada are going to be passing laws against evaporative cooling. Whoa, that's going to change some designs, right? If that's all you're doing, you're going to have to switch to a different kind of architecture, which might require you to consume more power. So there's a lot to think about, and you can't sleep on this. Complacency is not an option, only because the amount of data and the requirements from the end user is going to continue to grow. So good stuff here. Ready to go to the next one. All right, so we talked about this one, ChatGPT. So I don't know how to say this to everybody. This was the first time in my career that at a data center conference, I think 2 of the 3 keynotes focused on AI and ChatGPT, and many sessions focused on it as well. And remarkably, an AI company won an innovation award at Data Center World because of their presentations. Actually, my organization, Neuro, and I promise I wasn't presenting. I had a couple of engineers go up and do their talk, and I was just kind of waving the flag. Please note, before I talk about these 2 slides here, this is not a fad. This is not, electric vehicles are going to, take over the data center because it's going to produce so much data or whatever. This is very, very real. ChatGPT, the explosion of this technology is unparalleled. We have nothing to compare this to, period. 1 million users after 5 days and 100 million users after 2 months of its launch. And right now, the latest metric is just under 1 billion active users, about 900 million active users of this. That's silly, right? That's absolutely wild. And in a study that was done, a single Google search can power a 100-watt light bulb for 11 seconds, consuming about 0.3 kilowatts of energy, kilowatt hours of energy, I should say. And that was a study done by Google. Now, our data scientists also did a study in a single ChatGPT session. So that's when Greg Stover goes on ChatGPT and says, tell me a really fun story about Paw Patrol saving Superman. And that's what he reads to his 5-year-old. That's what I do, by the way. A single session like that is 50 to 100 times more powerful than a Google search and consuming about 3 to 4 kilowatt hours of energy. Now, if Greg Stover goes in there and says, create me a 50-slide PowerPoint deck, believe me, that's going to consume even more power. Now, the reality of this is it's not going away. None of this is slowing down. And as a person who is right now working in this space, that's bringing a full orchestration platform to do all of this really crazy stuff that you're hearing about in the data center, it's a completely different kind of design, right? It's GP graphic processing units, it's NVIDIA, it's more power, it's more cooling, and customers are asking for this. We'll talk about how this impacts customers in cloud in a little bit. You can go to the next slide when you're ready. Right, and this brings me to this point, cloud repatriation. I remember when I first asked this question, I got a lot of hate mail from people. They're like, Bill, this word is too hard. Now you're saying that cloud is going away, and I'm not. Don't tweet that out. I'm not saying that. There's a balance. There's a much more direct balance in people understanding what needs to live in the cloud and what needs to live on premise. This is the highest metric that we've seen so far. A clear majority, 83%, see some level of repatriation from cloud computing back to on-premises data centers or co-locations. Now, one slide that we removed, and I asked Jason to do this for the sake of time, were the kinds of workloads people are moving: ERP systems, Oracle databases, DevOps clusters, Kubernetes engines, like stuff that a few years ago, by default, it's living in the cloud. Like that's like the default answer. Now it's like, let's understand the value behind this and see how this works. Which brings me to the previous slide, ChatGPT. The natural answer for the customers that I've been working with, they don't want to go to the cloud. They don't want their data to be trained against anything else. They want to have data locality. They want to have data auditability. They want to have transparency and ethics built into their solution. Amazon is expensive, $60,000 a month just to test a graphics processing unit to train a large model. Whereas you can do this kind of stuff at half the price and more sustainably with like a data center partner powered by like a solution like ours. It doesn't have to be, but just giving you an example, our customers are coming to us and saying, we want to train these models at a co-location. I go to a co-location and say, Bill, this is great. We don't have any GPUs.
And then
And
they
I'm
call
stuck.
me saying I need a new power infrastructure design and I need a cooling infrastructure design. And I'm looking at 30 to 50 kilowatt air cooled units or greater than 50 kilowatt that will likely be liquid cooled.
In a way, but there's extraordinary things that we can do, even with non-liquid cooled, air cooled ecosystems. The challenge is this. Data centers, the traditional data center, they lost the internet race back when the internet came out to the hyperscalers. They did. We were relegated to VMware, Microsoft workloads, Citrix, all those important ones, but these big guys got a chance to build the internet. The same thing is happening right now. The data center is starting to lose this AI, ML, ChatGPT race to the hyperscalers because they're the only ones that have high performance compute clusters and GPUs. So if you're a data center operator or you know somebody, go back to your partners and be like, you need to be putting some graphics processing in it because all of your customers are doing this and it's bleeding into the cloud and the customers are reluctant to do so. I love this slide. I love the maturity in our market. I love the balance that we're seeing and asking the right questions. Just because it is in the cloud right now doesn't mean it should stay in it. And we're starting having much deeper conversations. Workloads are being deployed with an exit in mind, which is great for the first time in our industry. So I think this repatriation is going to continue to happen, and we're going to continue to see really good balances.
Even in the AI market, I mean, even though it's very immature space,
Especially.
I had a call yesterday with a customer who is going to help a client repatriate out of the cloud. They're spending over $1 million a month on their AI initiative in the cloud.
Yeah.
They figure they can save somewhere between 30 and 50% by bringing it back. So they're back to, all right, how do I do high density here? And in this example, phase one is going to be, probably 30 kilowatt racks, air cooled, but plummet so that when it's time, we can go to direct liquid to the chip.
Greg, you bring up such a good point. I know we don't have a lot of time. We're working with a data center partner that's testing out 20, 40, 60 kW per rack, and they're looking at the DGX units from NVIDIA. This is the wildest thing about this AI and ChatGPT and large language model conversation is that the majority of customers don't want to go in the cloud. They want to control their data. They want to control their models because this is not benign. This is not the kind of AI that we've been talking about 10, 15 years ago. This is generative conscious data. I use that word very carefully. We don't have time to get into what that means, but it is fundamentally different, and the customer wants to deploy a lot of this on-prem. So just food for thought. I think there's going to be a lot more conversation around this moving forward.
Well, and just point out, inferencing is much more latency sensitive. You can push the large language models out into the middle of nowhere in the giant data centers and crank them, but a lot of the inference is going to happen right where it's being used.
But that makes it easy. They don't inference training doesn't require GPUs. You could literally do it on a PC under your desk. That's the beauty of it. So, but anyway, maybe Jason, on our next one, we'll do an AI GPT 101, what this stuff actually looks like.
No, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Next slide. All right. So this one, this was an interesting slide. We asked this question last year, and look at this silly number. 94% are experiencing challenges. Now, the next slide that Jason actually hid, and by the way, your AFCOM members, everyone here should have access to this report that I wrote, as well as these slides. If you don't, just let me know offline on LinkedIn or something. I'll send this over to you. This was the same as last year, where over 90% experienced some kind of an issue. Now, the one metric I want every single person to focus on is that little red box that you see over there. 44% not only experienced challenge, but experienced an outage because of a supply chain issue. They couldn't get parts fast enough. Do you know what's scary? Last year, that number was 25%. That grew, and that's scary to me. And I'm not surprised, right? The biggest supply chain constraints include everything from UPS systems to chillers to power systems to PDUs and gravel and steel and rebar, and little power components that could stop an entire data center from coming online. It's wild. The kind of stories that I've heard in my young career in this has been extraordinary. I don't have a way to fix this, unfortunately. Have good partnerships, think locally, execute globally. But a lot of us are in this boat. It is definitely a constraint.
What's interesting is in the work that we've done over years of doing site selection work, a lot of what we've done is we also look at not only where the best markets are for data centers, but where the different providers like Vertiv has field technicians in a different market. From a supply chain standpoint, it's not as helpful to have a field technician to show up to fix something when he doesn't have any replacement parts,
Right.
right?
Well, I'll tell you something else that we've experienced as a positive. You know, in the past, I think many of our customers took great pride in doing things a little bit differently. And, you know, you've heard the term every data center is a snowflake. Well, in a supply chain crisis world, that's not a good thing. So we've seen a lot of activity around, you know, what do I really need to accomplish? What's the best way to accomplish, and creating repeatable standards in terms of your product designs. And you have to question, do I really need all that functionality? You know, what does it mean to me? Because to Bill's point, there's been some very small little things that have delayed giant projects. And then you step back and it's like, was that even a necessary design feature? And the answer often was no. So, you know, we've been talking to a lot of people about, you know, let's create standards, best practices, and build products that we can repeatably deliver on a constant basis.
Yep. And that's a really good point. Keep an eye on this. And by the way, I'm seeing some of the live questions come in. Yes, you're going to get a copy of this. Again, dude, find me on LinkedIn. I love talking about this stuff. There's a whole bunch of people on this list that I don't think I'm connected to yet. So let's keep this conversation going. And Nathan, I'm not wearing my cowboy hat right now. You are like the 50th person to mention that to me. I'm in Chicago. I'm not going to walk downtown Chicago with a cowboy hat. It'll look kind of weird. Now, next time I'm in Texas, which is next week, I promise the boots, the belt, and the hat will come back, and I will take a selfie from the Lone Star State. Any more questions? By all means, pop them in there. We might answer them live. Jason, next slide, please. I'll keep this one brief. It's kind of a heavier topic. This one's an important one to consider. Now, there's something in this one that now, by the way, ransomware has been at the top of the list for the past 7 years. Let's just start there. That's very, very scary. DDoS has jumped. The types of DDoS attacks that we're seeing are really scary. Volumetric network layer and application attacks. A10 networks. By the way, I recently wrote a report with A10. It's on Data Center Frontier. Specifically focus on DDoS attacks within the data center. If you want that report, please just ping me. I will be happy to send it over to you. It's very detailed to understand what modern DDoS looks like and versus legacy. 4 terabits, 4 terabit per second DDoS attacks. A couple of years ago, the biggest one was the Mariah botnet when a whole bunch of IoT devices got hacked, and it was 623 gigabits per second. We were freaking out. Now they're up to 4 terabits. There's not a lot of things that can handle that kind of traffic. The other one that I want to mention, for the first time in doing this report, inside human threats and outside human threats made the top 5 list. We don't talk about this enough. So, you know, somebody doing something accidental or malicious internally, somebody doing something accidental or malicious externally. I wrote an article for Data Center Knowledge called Time to Double Check Your Data Center Deadbolts. Please, please, if you have a chance, give that a read. You know, when I stop talking, maybe I'll try and find that and I'll put it in the chat window for all of you to take a look at. It's legit. It's legit. There's a lot of concerns, and federal regulators that are starting to take notice of this because we are critical infrastructure. There's no sugarcoating it. So this is something that everyone on this call, just if this is your little golden nugget, take it away. Think about physical security from either an inside or an outside threat. I know we don't talk about this, but I need to be very clear. Things happen. Things happen, and we just need to be more prepared for that. So this is a good one. Next slide. Oh, that's it. Yay, I get to take a breath.
You get to take a breath. So we got this last slide before we're going to take Q&A. We've got about 7 minutes for Q&A, but I want to talk about upcoming calendar. Number one, the next AFCOM webinar is on Tuesday, June 27th. Deep dive into ocean-cooled data center facilities. You can access that information through the link provided above or through AFCOM's national website. Later this month, actually at the same time as Data Center Dynamics, the big conference we go to every year there in Silicon Valley. Of note, 2 of our presenters here, Greg is doing a lunch briefing on their first day Monday on sustainability of all topics. Wow, what a surprise. And then Bill, you're also giving your session on data center need, right, for talent. Di, maybe you should fly up for that. Good. Anyway, and then lastly, AFCOM Data Center World 2024 again announced. Bill mentioned it earlier, April 15th through the 18th there in Washington, D.C. You can register via the link below. or via the actual website. So
Hey, Jason,
Q&A,
I
closing
just
comments.
want to add, I've been going to AFCOM events literally since the 80s. And I thought this year's Data Center World was one of the best I've ever attended. The thirst for knowledge, the presenters, the topics, our space is moving so fast. You mentioned earlier, there's different types of data center groups. I personally believe the last bastion of enterprise focused to go get knowledge, to go network, and to have fun is truly AFCOM and Data Center World. And we need to protect that, defend that, and keep it as pure as it is right now. I thought it was a tremendous event. For those of you that are on now, put in your budget requests today for next year. I haven't talked to anybody that didn't think this was the best event they'd been. Everybody learned something. Everybody's planning on coming back, and can't wait till a week before and say, hey, I want to go to AFCOM. So I'm just throwing that out there. Now's the time to start planning.
One of the things
please
that
join us.
before we take any questions out there, and Doug and Yeet, I'll ask you if you can identify if there are any questions that are out there. But one thing that we're looking to do is we're looking to expand our board. If you're here in Southern California on the IT side or data center operations side of the business, we can use some more end users to bring their talents to our board, bring their thought leadership to our board. If you have any interest, reach out to anybody on our board, whether it's Yeet, Doug, Di, David, Brad. We'd love to hear from you. And also we'd love to hear what kind of topics that you'd like to hear about. We will be having the third quarter educational series event, as well as an annual social. And so we look forward to hearing from you all and seeing you all at those various events. Anyway, do we have any questions that we'd like to address?
And while you all are thinking, take a look at the questions and answers pop-out box. It should be towards the bottom. Alicia Schapp, our amazing coordinator for AFCOM, and she is amazing, has been posting a couple of things. Number one, she posted, you can log in to review the full State of the Data Center report. She's got a link in there for you. When registration opening, and that data center security article that I wrote for Data Center Knowledge is also in the Q&A box. Y'all can check it out.
Doug, Yeet, anything that I can't see the box because I'm sharing my screen at the moment?
Yeah, Jason,
Yeah,
one question is if people are asking how they can access the recording of this session.
we will end up posting it on our LinkedIn page, I believe on the chapter website, as well as Alicia's going to get a copy of this. She'll post it on the national.
And I'd like to make a note as well. Even if you're not on the job market, don't forget about other people who could use the help. Refer them to somebody, keep them in mind. You never know if they might be able to help you out one day as well.
And I'll just take a moment to say we have 804 jobs open on our website today. So if anybody wonders if digital infrastructure is growing,
yeah,
and you can't find a job, go look now. Every type of job. Our ecosystem is rich of every type of position that could exist in any organization. And
they're evolving. It's the new technology. It doesn't mean that jobs are going away. It's just creating new jobs.
Different types of jobs, but they're out there. So I'm excited for our ecosystem. I'm excited for everybody that's on this call. We're in a very good place. A lot of work to be done. There's going to be some challenges. We talked about it, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah,
I'd like to just make a comment. Of course, first want to thank our panelists, Bill and Greg and Jeremy, and of course, Di and Jason for your moderation. I mean, this has really been a jam-packed section, so it's really great information. I think a stimulus for all of us that work in technology, just thinking about what's going on. And, aside from supply chain and some of the other, environmental and energy related things that I think we're all having to work through. It's, I think an exciting time to be in the data center IT environment.
Well, listen, my days of moderating panel discussions might be over. I'm just going to ask AI to moderate the next panel discussion.
We did that. Right?
Yeah.
At Dice Biz Now, it was me, Eddie Shooter on a panel. And because we were down a panelist, we literally brought my little iPad mini with me, this little guy, and we put ChatGPT on there, and it was our third panelist. We would ask questions and we like, ChatGPT, would you mind summarizing this thought? Now, it is very verbose, so we would take like a couple of bullet points.
It was
But
fun.
We had ChatGPT as a panelist. Jason, it's not going to replace you. Let's just start there.
Well, listen, we're right at the hour, and so we're going to wrap up. And I want to again thank everybody for their time today. Again, look for the postings on social media. We'll try and crop this down a little bit, do little segments of it for people to share. And thank you, everybody, and we look forward to seeing everybody on the next event.
Go get them, gang.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks all.
Take care.